As a constitutional law attorney, former senior legal advisor, and personal counsel to President Donald J. Trump, Jenna Ellis believes in the rule of law and the importance of integrity in our elections. And she's ready to tackle the big cultural and legal issues facing America. This is the Jenna Ellis Show. Here is your host, Jenna Ellis.
Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Jenna Ellis Show. I'm Jenna Ellis, and I'm so excited to have with me today Attorney General for the great state of Missouri, Andrew Bailey. He is leading the charge on Missouri versus Biden, which is the most important case in the country right now, because this is all about big tech's collusion with the Biden administration to circumvent and curtail our constitutionally protected right to free speech, free association, and participation in the free marketplace of ideas. So there is a big oral argument coming up on Thursday in the Fifth Circuit where the Biden administration has actually appealed the preliminary injunction to say, hey, we want to determine arbitrarily and capriciously what misinformation and disinformation means and to censor your speech. So I know that everyone listening to this or watching on Rumble, and by the way, click subscribe wherever you are listening, you are all very concerned about this because as Americans, as Christians, as conservatives, we always are championing the free exchange of ideas, the right to disagree, and the right to access more information. We should be able to determine for ourselves what we believe and what we discount. But misinformation, according to the Biden administration, just means anything that they don't want you to hear or say. So Attorney General Bailey is going to talk more about this and why this is the most important case in the country right now, coming up right after this.
With inflation, the banking world collapse, and everything that Joe Biden is doing not to protect America, you need to make sure to secure your financial health, especially in retirement. And hey, if you're a millennial like me, that actually is sooner than you think. You need to start now, even if you are a millennial or a Gen Zer, to make sure that your financial health is actually healthy when we get to retirement. And Legacy Precious Metals has a revolutionary new online platform that allows you to invest in gold and silver online in real time. In a few easy steps, you can open an account online, select your metals of choice, and choose to have them stored in a vault or shipped right to your door. You'll have access to a dashboard where you can track your portfolio growth in real time anytime. You'll see transparent pricing on each coin and bar, and this puts you in complete control of your money. The platform is free to sign up for. Visit legacypminvestments.com and open your account and see this new investing platform for yourself. Gold hedges against inflation and against a volatile stock market. A truly diversified portfolio isn't just more stocks and bonds, but different asset classes. This brand new platform allows you to make investments in gold and silver, no matter how small or large, with just a few clicks. Visit legacypm.com to get started. You can download the free investor's guide, and you can also call Legacy PM Investments to talk to a portfolio expert to get expert answers to to customize your personal portfolio. So visit legacypminvestments.com to get started. Tell them that Jenna sent you.
So joining me now is Attorney General of Missouri, Andrew Bailey. And Andrew, thanks so much for joining me twice in one day. You joined me on radio this morning, but for those who didn't listen to the radio program, shame on everyone. They should go to afr.net and listen to the podcast there. But let's talk about Missouri versus Biden and why this is so important and the upcoming argument on Thursday in the Fifth Circuit. What is going to be presented there?
Yeah, well, this is all about protecting our constitutional right to free speech. We've uncovered a relationship of coercion and collusion from the Biden White House across a spectrum of federal bureaucratic agencies to silence American voices on big tech social media platforms. We went to court back at the end of May and asked for a nationwide preliminary injunction to build a wall of separation between tech and state to protect our First Amendment right to free speech. And in celebration of our nation's founding on July 4th, the district court handed down a nationwide preliminary injunction, 155 pages, that laid the first brick in that wall of separation between tech and state. Biden's Department of Justice very quickly has appealed that decision, both at the trial court level and up to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. So we're in front of a 3-judge panel at the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals this week, arguing in favor of that nationwide injunction. We feel it's imperative now more than ever to keep that first brick in the wall of separation between tech and state in place and continue to build on it as we move forward towards an election cycle here in the coming months and year.
Yeah, this is, I truly believe, the most important case going on in the country right now because, as you very aptly put it, it is a separation between tech and state. And this is amazing to me that the Biden administration can think that this could possibly even be constitutional. I mean, there is literally no limiting principle in what they're suggesting. And to say that they get to arbitrarily and capriciously determine what is and is not misinformation not only runs afoul of the First Amendment, but also just the basic understanding of the right to disagree, the right to believe, the right to participate in social media or media exchange and dialogue in a public forum. I mean, what can possibly be their argument as to why they're challenging this?
Well, and you're right. I mean, they target core political speech for censorship. That clearly runs afoul of well-settled constitutional principles as articulated by the United States Supreme Court interpreting the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. I believe, like our founding fathers, that the rights in the Bill of Rights come from God, not man, and that the whole purpose of the document is to protect the rest of us from government, the original understanding of the right to free speech. And by the way, it's not a coincidence that it's housed in the very First Amendment with the right to freedom of press and freedom of religion, because those are rights of conscience. And it's not only the right to speak, but the right to hear as well. For every speaker, there may be 25, 50, 100, 150, 500 listeners who are deprived of access to information when the government censors their speech. And, the original understanding was that the right to free speech was intended to invite dissent into a free, fair, and open marketplace of ideas so the people could come to consensus on what was and wasn't true and what they believed and what they didn't believe, free from government censorship. The remedy for disfavored speech in this country has always been counter speech, not government censorship. And the founders knew that it was a timeless principle. It didn't matter that in the 1700s they communicated through pamphlets, and in the 1920s that moved to radio, and in the 1950s television, in the 1990s internet, and in the 2000s big tech social media platforms. And so, these are timeless principles of freedom that are a part of our legacy here in the United States of America. And it's always, the Constitution is always going to be worth standing up and fighting for.
Absolutely. And these are, as you mentioned, our core values, our core principles, and core rights that our founders recognized come from God, our creator, not our government. It's the sole purpose of government to preserve and protect those, not to collude with these big tech media companies to try to run in round the First Amendment and try to say, well, this is just an agency now that we're co-opting to do our dirty work for us. And Attorney General, that has actually come out in a lot of the Twitter files, the Facebook files from the Weaponization of Government Committee. And I think from a bigger 30,000 foot context, people forget that this started really, and this whole description of misinformation started with the whole COVID narrative. And the government then was saying, well, we want to censor these things because literally it could kill you. And so we're doing this out of safety, out of emergency powers, and, some of those things. Well, a lot of that, most of it has been debunked now. And so how does that play into the parameters and the contours that we should establish in this case in particular?
Well, that demonstrates why the wall of separation between tech and state is absolutely vital. Look, COVID was the Trojan horse that got the enemy behind the gates. And what happened was that the government said, hey, anything that's dis or malinformation as it relates to the government's response to COVID is target for censorship. And there's a series of emails exchanged. And by the way, we've got 20,000 documents. We've done numerous depositions, preliminary discovery to get that preliminary injunction. We've only begun to scratch the surface. There's more work to do here once we get back down to the district court level as far as merits discovery is concerned, more depositions and documents to obtain. But in there's an email exchange between March, April, and May of 2021 where the White House Communications Department specifically goes after anyone who's expressing hesitancy about the vaccine or questioning its effectiveness or questioning the effectiveness of mask mandates and asking that they be deplatformed, de-emphasized, specifically saying, hey, take down a Tommy Lahren video, take down a Tucker Carlson video, targeting specific speech in violation of the First Amendment. And that we can demonstrate that in the evidence that we have that we put on in court, clearly core political speech. Now, what has come out subsequently from Congressman Jordan's hearings is the Facebook's response. I mean, it's like a ripple in the pond. We can show you that first stone being dropped into the water. He can show you the subsequent ripples where Facebook internally is saying, hey, look, the government is asking us to violate the First Amendment. We would not, the government censorship program is pushing Facebook beyond Facebook's own internal censorship policies. That's where the element of coercion comes in. The government demanded censorship, and big tech social media complied with those demands. And we can, again, demonstrated that in the evidence. But to your point, this is scary stuff because it's grown. We know that the vast censorship enterprise has grown beyond the White House Communications Department, and it grew so quickly, so fast that the federal government had to construct a new bureaucratic apparatus to management. In other words, the censorship demands were so voluminous that they had to centralize one resource to make those requests, those demands of big tech social media. So it has gotten, is mushroomed, it is expansive now, and we have every reason to believe it's expanded beyond just COVID issues. It's expanded to abortion topics, global warming, transgender issues, election issues. And that's the number one justification you hear from the left, that they've got to protect our elections. Well, that's election interference. I mean, if that isn't core political speech, nothing is. And so it is clear that the left has jettisoned the right to free speech in this country. We're not going to let Joe Biden destroy free speech in America.
Yeah, and it's clear that anything that they want to suppress and their opposition to their preferred political narrative is then just deemed misinformation, because these are ideas, facts, opinions that they just don't want anyone to say or interact with or hear, because maybe they're going to be convinced. And so to your point that this has now blossomed into other types of content, this isn't just about COVID. It's not just what they've said under the auspices of safety. And I agree with you that I think that that was just their mechanism and their pretext to attempt to lay a precedent that they can just harness anything under the name of an emergency and say, well, now we're going to coerce you. What are they even arguing is possibly the definition of misinformation or any sort of limiting principle?
Well, they don't have one, and that's the point. It's infinitely regressive. There is no limiting principle there. It's a slippery slope, and they've already slid halfway down the hill, and that's why that wall of separation between tech and state is imperative as we move into the election cycle. But to your point, I mean, three issues here. Number one, the evidence that we laid out in court in our preliminary injunction hearing established that the speech that was targeted during COVID as quote unquote misinformation, first of all, it was core political speech. It was protected by the First Amendment, so it was illegal to censor that speech. But number two, all the speech they targeted as misinformation ended up being truthful. So people were denied access to information upon which to make personal health decisions. The government was denied, state governments were denied access to information that would have allowed them to set public health policy. And then number three, the speech that was targeted by the federal government was almost exclusively conservative speech. And 100% of the speech targeted was in opposition to Joe Biden. So it's clearly viewpoint discrimination. It's not targeting dis, or malinformation. It's targeting a viewpoint that disagrees with the ruling elites that are in power today. And so that's scary stuff. The courts described it as a dystopian scenario of Orwellian proportion, referencing George Orwell's classic 1984 novel and Oceana's Ministry of Truth. And certainly we agree with that. And that's why we've got to keep fighting to protect Americans' right to free speech. And one wonders if the left would be shrieking so loudly if their voices were the ones that were targeted for censorship.
Yeah, well, of course they would, but they never expect that any of these things will be used against them. One, because conservatives actually want to conserve the U.S. Constitution, and so we're not going to do that. And we know that our arguments will actually win if heard on the merits. But this is what the left does all the time. They just want to silence debate, and they want to force their will on everyone. And it's interesting, you told me this morning on radio that the only person that they can point to as, oh, this isn't just conservative viewpoint discrimination, is that they also targeted RFK Jr., which I think is hilarious, because even though he's a Democrat, he's an old school Democrat, and he's running against Joe Biden. So he's a political opponent. And also he's been at the forefront for condemning vaccine mandates, for vaccine skepticism, and for actually wanting to get the COVID truth out there. And so to say that somehow he's evidence or proof that this isn't just viewpoint discrimination, I think completely flies in the face of their argument and proves the opposite.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's in the way of a judicial admission when in court on May 26th, the judge had a colloquy with the Department of Justice and a series of questions, asked them, if it would to provide any examples of speech that was targeted for censorship that was not conservative speech. And the only example the Department of Justice had was RFK Jr. So again, it's clearly viewpoint discrimination, which proves the point that it has nothing to do with misdis or malinformation and everything to do with illegal censorship of speech that's protected by the First Amendment. This has never been about truth. It's always been about power.
So well said. And now to your point about election interference, I mean, one of the things that that big tech and media complied with was the demand to keep Hunter Biden's laptop story suppressed, and any of the outlets that were actually talking about that We will never know how that may have influenced or impacted the 2020 election. But things like that just show that people have the right to consider information. There are absolutely no metrics by which each individual voter can determine who they want to support and cast their vote for elected office in this country. But the Democrats think that they have a monopoly and a right to these elected positions. And that's what concerns me as an American citizen. We're talking about the sanctity of our elections. We're talking about preserving democracy. I mean, do they know that we're in a constitutional republic? But beyond that, do they actually want free and fair elections? Because all the evidence is showing to the contrary.
Yeah, no, they absolutely do not want free, fair, and open elections because they'll lose. They can't compete in the marketplace of ideas, so they have to shut down the other side's ideas because the left's ideas fail on the merits. And so certainly the Hunter Biden, suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop story when the Department of Justice was in possession of that laptop for up to a year before the 2020 election, knew of its authenticity and yet planted the seed with big tech social media that there would be a Russian disinformation story related to Hunter Biden. And then on the very eve of the New York Post breaking that story, there were direct communications between DOJ officials and Facebook that resulted in the suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop story, which directly impacted the 2020 election. That's information the American voting public deserved to have at their disposal in which to make on which to make decisions at the ballot box. They were deprived of that information, and that's the stated objective of the left leading up to the 2024 election. That they want to have this censorship enterprise in place to quote unquote protect us from misinformation related to election interference, when really all they're going to do is suppress any viewpoint that's contrary to their own because they can't compete on the merits.
Yeah, which is so fundamentally opposed to the U.S. Constitution and everything that America stands for. It is disgusting. It's disturbing. And so, Attorney General, you have this preliminary injunction now in place. And you also mentioned that big tech just complied with this, and they were willing participants. They were willing to collude with Biden. And so you have the preliminary injunction, but ultimately, what is your goal in terms of accountability for this type of collusion and this type and a remedy for this kind of gross abuse of our system?
Yeah, well, let me say this too in response to the first part of your query there, that at the end of the day, it is disgusting, and it's a violation of our legacy of freedom and our founding principles and the rights codified in the Bill of Rights given to us by God and so that are protected by the Constitution. But it's also counterproductive. People don't trust the government if they think the government is squelching their speech. And again, no one would tolerate this if it was happening on a cell phone. If you and I were talking on a cell phone and the Department of Justice was listening in and heard us saying something they didn't like and started muting the conversation, no one would tolerate that. Why would we tolerate it on big tech social media platforms? And the difference is that Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act has been misinterpreted by the courts and has allowed a monopoly to develop as it relates to big tech social media. And that has been the hook for the coercion from the Biden administration. I mean, on the campaign trail and then again from the White House lawn, President Biden has accused big tech of killing people by not censoring enough, has threatened the repeal or amendment of Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which is the economic boon for these companies. And so, yeah, they went along with the censorship demands because they had to. They're held captive. And the censorship is easier when it's across a smaller spectrum of the marketplace because of this government-created monopoly. And so it's absolutely problematic. And to your point, that's why we've got to build the wall of separation between tech and state. That's the only remedy here. The first brick of that wall was laid by the court's order on July 4th of this year. And we're going to keep building on that wall to protect our election in 2024. And I would point out, if you read the 155-page district court order, the majority of that document is a recitation, a recounting, and enumeration of the evidence that we've put on in court. The only a small part of that document is the actual court's instructions on what not to do. And all the court says is that the federal government is prohibited from coordinating with big tech social media to censor core political speech. Essentially, all the court said is don't violate the Constitution. Well, what is there to appeal? And yet the Department of Justice had the audacity to race back into court and say that they would suffer irreparable harm if they weren't allowed to continue censoring American voices in violation of the First Amendment. They also had the gall to say, well, we don't know what is and isn't protected speech. Well, aren't these Ivy League attorneys working at the Department of Justice? Like they need a lesson in constitutional case law. I mean, certainly that those resources are available to them. They would waive sovereign immunity from violating a well-established law. So certainly they understand the contours. So this is farcical. I mean, the very people that claim to be protecting us from misinformation are in fact spreading misinformation. And so again, that's why this suit is so important. We're at the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals on the preliminary injunction. We anticipate the court will affirm the preliminary injunction. We'll go back to the district court, continue merits discovery, and hold people accountable if they're violating our First Amendment rights going forward. And this lawsuit's the best mechanism to do that. Again, we need to lay more bricks in the wall of separation between tech and state to protect the 2024 election cycle. And this is the best vehicle I have to accomplish that objective.
Yeah, which is just incredible, and I think that this is, like I said, the most important lawsuit going on in the country right now. But I think that this just shows that Ivy League educated lawyers didn't really get a good education in Con Law 101, because they really don't know. All they know is what the U.S. Supreme Court has said, and they want to fit within the margins and the contours of whatever they can warp and manipulate the U.S. Constitution to say. And the vast penumbra doctrine that you and I both learned and hopefully totally rejected as absolutely stupid in law school. I mean, some of this stuff is just unbelievable what they teach future lawyers. And I can't even imagine in an Ivy League law school how terrible it is. But they really just need to read it for themselves, and they need to understand it in context, and they need to understand and actually embrace the role of the government and why they can't do this, and why more speech is better, and why we have the political system that we do in this country. But clearly, this isn't what the Biden administration wants. And so when you're talking about building that wall of separation between tech and state, what do those bricks actually look like? I mean, what, besides getting the preliminary injunction and actually holding them accountable, I mean, what does that actually look like when we're talking about maybe some precedent value here?
Yeah, well, first of all, let me say I feel very fortunate to have studied constitutional law under Professor Josh Hawley, who now serves in the United States Senate. So I was well taught in these principles, and certainly share values on these issues with him. And proud to be leading this fight on behalf of the state of Missouri. But
makes sense why you're so smart then. Yes.
Like I said, the first brick of that wall was laid with this preliminary injunction. Another brick will come when we win the suit and lay a permanent injunction down. Again, we have done preliminary discovery for a preliminary injunction. We have merits discovery. We're going to root out this vast censorship enterprise everywhere that it may lie. We know it's expanded. We know it's grown. We know it is very expansive. And so we've got to continue to leave no stone unturned as we pursue and root out this vast censorship enterprise. Long term, it's going to be up to Congress to, number one, relook Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act and determine what needs to take place there. But then number two, is there an inspector general role to play here to monitor compliance with the court order? Certainly we can do that through discovery. And again, once we get that permanent injunction in place, it'll reaffirm our values and our legacy of freedom that our founding fathers laid down in the 1700s and passed on to us, and that previous generations have fought to defend. And certainly we take up that mantle of stewardship and responsibility to defend it now, to hand off that legacy of freedom to the next generation.
And we have to have fighters like you. And I so appreciate that you were taking the lead on this case. And of course, we would be remiss not to mention Attorney General Jeff Landry out of Louisiana, who is also partnering with you on this case. I met him actually my very first official day working for President Trump. And he and the entire Louisiana delegation were there. We were going to a rally, and he became one of my absolute favorite people because he was just so kind, and he has such a passion for the Constitution and for our founding principles, like you do as well. And so in just the last few minutes that I have with you, Attorney General Andrew Bailey, I also want to ask you one question a little bit outside the scope of your lawsuit, but in terms of big tech, then just censoring on their own and maybe saying, okay, well, the government can't tell us directly, but we kind of know based on what the Biden administration likes, what it doesn't like. So for example, YouTube. I mean, I've been suspended. This show has been suspended. Episodes have been taken down multiple times just because they don't like the content that I provide based on a Christian conservative worldview. That's ridiculous. So what needs to be done as well, just to make sure that there's not even private big tech censorship, even if it's not the direct result of collusion with government?
Well, there needs to be more competition in the big tech marketplace. I mean, that's the problem. Again, when you have a monopoly, there aren't the same open market impulses and constraints that would compel these companies to abide by the Constitution. I mean, yeah, you're right. It's bad enough when big tech social media censors American voices. It's worse when it's done at the behest of the federal government, because then we run afoul of the First Amendment. And certainly that's what our lawsuit has established, is the coercion and collusion. But you're right. I mean, at this point, absent some reform in the marketplace and that wall of separation, there's no way we can guarantee our rights will be protected going forward. And that's why this fight's so important. We'll continue to push it forward.
Yeah, it is really important. And I don't think our founders ever anticipated a big tech oligarchy as a substitute for the freedoms that are protected under the First Amendment. And so this lawsuit, like I said, is the most important right now in the country. I hope that everyone listening is praying on Thursday to make sure that argument is the best that it possibly can be. Pray for the judges on the Fifth Circuit that they would rule in favor of the U.S. Constitution. And any closing thoughts, Attorney General Andrew Bailey, thanks so much for your time, and thank you for being a champion for freedom.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on. All the best to you and your listeners. Really grateful to have a great partner in Jeff Landry down in Louisiana, and certainly the private plaintiffs as well. Excited to be leading the fight on this effort to defend our right to free speech, and look forward to circling back with you when we get a good result at the Fifth Circuit.
All right, I'll talk to you Thursday then. Sounds good. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jenna.
With inflation, the banking world collapse, and everything that Joe Biden is doing not to protect America, you need to make sure to secure your financial health, especially in retirement. And hey, if you're a millennial like me, that actually is sooner than you think. You need to start now, even if you are a millennial or a Gen Zer, to make sure that your financial health is actually healthy when we get to retirement. And Legacy Precious Metals has a revolutionary new online platform that allows you to invest in gold and silver online in real time. In a few easy steps, you can open an account online, select your metals of choice, and choose to have them stored in a vault or shipped right to your door. You'll have access to a dashboard where you can track your portfolio growth in real time anytime. You'll see transparent pricing on each coin and bar, and this puts you in complete control of your money. The platform is free to sign up for. Visit legacypminvestments.com and open your account and see this new investing platform for yourself. Gold hedges against inflation and against a volatile stock market. A truly diversified portfolio isn't just more stocks and bonds, but different asset classes. This brand new platform allows you to make investments in gold and silver, no matter how small or large, with just a few clicks. Visit legacypm.com to get started. You can download the free investor's guide, and you can also call Legacy PM Investments to talk to a portfolio expert to get expert answers to to customize your personal portfolio. So visit legacypminvestments.com to get started. Tell them that Jenna sent you.
On MyPillow's 20-year anniversary, with over 80 million MyPillows sold, Mike Lindell wants to thank each and every one of you by giving you the lowest price in history on his MyPillows. You will receive a queen-size MyPillow for only $19.98. The regular price is $69.98 and just $10 more for a king size. You'll receive deep discounts on all MyPillow products such as bed sheets, mattress toppers, pet beds, mattresses, my slippers, which I love, and so much more. This is the time to try out some of the amazing products you've had your eye on from MyPillow. So go to mypillow.com and enter promo code Jenna to receive this amazing offer on the queen size MyPillow for $19.98. You can go to mypillow.com or call 1-800-564-8475. Be sure to use the promo code Jenna. This offer comes with a 10-year warranty and a 60-day money-back guarantee. It's time to start getting the quality sleep you deserve. This offer comes with a 10-year warranty and a 60-day money-back guarantee. It's time to start getting the quality sleep you deserve. Go to mypillow.com, use the promo code Jenna.